Welcome to the Tango Banter. Before we dive into our discussion, I want to remind you that I will be at the Viva Mexico Tango Festival next week. If you are going to be there, I would love to meet you. And yes, I am doing private sessions. I have a few slots open. If you're interested in booking a session with me, then go ahead and reach out to me on social media, or you can email me at connect@imsotango.com. The episode today was inspired by a message that I received from one of the listeners, which I always appreciate getting your stories, your feedback, your experiences. So keep those coming. So the main theme of the message had to do with this idea of talent. And she writes, "What is talent actually? Does it just mean that you can learn things easier or faster or with less work? Or can you just magically do things that others will never be able to do? Great dancers always say hard work gets you further than talent. And while I agree that talent without the hard work won't get you far, where do you think hard work can get you without talent?" So I've been thinking a lot about these ideas and how universal that experience is. I can tell you that I've asked those questions of myself, of my own experience, quite a few times. But most of it for me happened in art school. Therefore, a lot of my stories have to do with my time in art school. By the time I got to tango, I felt I already had gone through a lot of the grind of just questioning myself and my self-worth in art. So I had certain beliefs I had already formed by the time I got to tango. But when I was first going to art school right away, I noticed that there were certain students who got a lot of attention and a lot of praise from the professors. They seemed to possess some sort of talent or quality that I was lacking. And throughout my years in undergrad and then my graduate work, and then even when I graduated and was working as a professional artist, I constantly was questioning my existence of my own talent, because it seemed like no matter how much work or care or attention I was giving to my art, there were certain people who worked half as hard as me and were getting a lot more attention, or their art wasn't as compelling as I thought mine was, and it was still getting attention that I felt like I deserved to get. So there's definitely this feeling when you see somebody next to you and you kind of marvel at the ease with which they're doing things, and they're getting the praise and they're being successful, whereas somehow it leaves you feeling like there's something wrong with you, that there's a lack. And you know what I did with that feeling is to say, okay, I don't have talent. I don't. Obviously, I've resigned myself to this. And my answer was the hard work. I thought, well, I don't have the talent. I don't have the natural ability the way certain artists had for figure drawing or, rendering, or they were just so creative and so masterful with the materials that they were using. I didn't have that, but I had work ethic and I had discipline and I had the belief in following through and sticking with it. And I think that served me really well in some respects, because definitely of all the people who pursued art in my class, even throughout my whole undergrad and graduate career, I was one of the few people who persisted and continued to make art for some time. So there was a feeling of like, well, if I can't make it on talent, I'll make it on stamina. I'll just last. I'll last longer than others. And, that carried me for a long time. But then I kind of got to the end of that road as well. So, in my experience, the answer of hard work, it's an answer for some things, but not everything, because ultimately it didn't get me to the place that I was striving to get to. So it brings us to this question of like, what exactly is talent? And is talent something that you are just born with and you have, or is it something that you cultivate and you can sort of create that in yourself? I'm not imagining that the next few minutes of this podcast are going to fully answer this question, but I'm excited to open up this discussion. I would love to hear your take on this question in the comments, or if you want to reach out to me, you can send me a DM and tell me your thoughts. So, growing up, I believed talent was exemplified by Mozart. I played piano growing up, and for some reason, Mozart takes on a particular place in your imagination when you're very young and you're introduced to this genius child musician who composed all this amazing stuff while he was practically in the crib. And if you've ever seen the movie Amadeus about Mozart, there's a scene where he's playing the piano while he's laying in people's hands and the piano is like behind him. It's kind of hard to describe that, I'm realizing, but if you've seen the film, I think you'll know the scene I'm referring to. And for whatever reason, that scene became the image for talent. That talent meant that you had some sort of extraordinary ability that nobody else has, and it's on the level of genius. And I always wanted to have that. So growing up, as I thought about that scene, or as I thought about the idea of talent, there was this search for my own talent, for my own ability like that. And I felt like I found that through art to a certain extent, but I definitely did not find the virtuosity that I perceived in Mozart. I did not find that for myself in art. And that realization that I did not have that virtuosity pushed me to then work really hard and transition into this idea that, well, it's not the talent ultimately, it's the hard work that's going to take you there. So coming into Tango, I was really resolved to the fact that I had no talent and that my edge was in hard work. So when I was studying Tango and getting better at it and whatever compliments I got, it was never through the lens of like, oh, I found my talent. It was more from, okay, good, I pass. I've checked the boxes. I was able to fulfill the expectations. And I never ever in my life imagined that I would become a professional tango teacher and dancer. I did not believe that I had the ability for that. I didn't think I had the talent. And looking back, actually, I'm really aware of how perhaps I actually showed signs of being a dancer-like personality, but I didn't necessarily have a chance to experience that. Which brings me to this observation that I made about those people who have this magical ability to do something really well. When I've encountered those kinds of people who seem to have a talent and they end up really developing it to a high degree, a lot of times what became obvious was that early on, their talent was somehow recognized, supported, and then fostered. And more than anything, I think that's the deciding factor for a lot of us, whether our natural personality traits and our, I guess, talent possibilities don't get to develop because we don't get the support a lot of times for those qualities, those skills to start developing early on. So for me, by the time I started dance, I really didn't feel that I had anything to offer I couldn't even call myself a dancer, but I just did it because I enjoyed it. And it wasn't that I could help doing it. It wasn't like I had a choice. I wanted to do it. And the more I did it and the more progress I made, the more I started seeing that talent and what we call talent is actually perhaps even fabricated by our culture, by our society, the constructs that we create to organize our thoughts and our reality, perhaps. Because for a lot of us, what we define talent is based on the recognition and praise that we observe others give to someone. So we value something based on observing others celebrate it. And so then we put ourselves into this position of saying, okay, so now I need to be like that. I need to be a certain way so that I get the same praise. And if I don't have the ability to do this thing that will give me that praise, that means I'm lacking in talent. That's what I saw myself doing in hindsight with art. For me, the realization came fairly recently as an adult that it was my lack of experience and exposure to dance that pushed me into art. Art was the closest thing I found that could give me some sort of expressive fulfillment. But ultimately, it wasn't my purpose. It wasn't my specific medium. My medium ended up being tango. But I would have never thought that that was really my true direction until I allowed myself to just go into it and sort of get lost in it without treating it as anything special. And even though I worked really hard on it at first, part of my failure to, get satisfied with tango early on was the fact that I was applying all of this expectation on it. I was trying to make myself into something I was seeing out there, and I was trying to measure up in a certain way. But eventually, I had to let go of that. I had to let go of the hard work. I had to let go of the discipline because I could see that I was once again running on this preconceived, trained thought of that I don't measure up and I need to do something to be acceptable. I think everyone ultimately has talent in some area, in some form of expression. But not everybody has a chance to cultivate it and develop it early on. And a lot of us have to kind of reverse engineer it later in life. Like for me, it's pretty obvious now that whatever success I've developed in tango didn't come from my necessarily extreme abilities as a dancer or my talents, because I did not come into tango as a trained dancer and I didn't believe I really had any talent. Nor was it my hard work, because a lot of the hard work that I applied in tango ended up kind of backfiring. And I talked a lot about, certain periods of my tango where I quit and decided to not even dance anymore. And partially it was that pressure that I was putting myself under. So whatever I've been able to accomplish as a dancer and the fulfillment that I've come to has really come from a very specific mindset that has nothing to do with talent and everything to do with just having fun and enjoying myself and going with my curiosity. That's not something I could have done for myself as a child. A lot of my activities were controlled by my external circumstances. But as an adult, Tango actually gave me that opportunity to discover what exactly is it that I was after. And even within Tango, I realized I have a very particular type of mind, a particular interest. There are certain things that I enjoy about Tango and certain things that are not interesting to me at all. So I believe and I expect that every single person who comes into Tango, not only do we have different talents in general, but even those of us who have specific talents, specific proclivity for tango, for dance, we probably don't resemble each other's talents very closely when we really examine them side by side. Every dancer that I've talked to who's been dancing for a long time has a very particular flavor of interest and their own uh, outlook on tango and their own philosophy around tango. And I think it's because as we allow ourselves to follow our own curiosity, it will guide us in the path of least resistance, of most enjoyment. And I think that's where the difficulty lies, because somehow, at least for me, talent and hard work and discipline are somehow more respectable and more virtuous than fun, pleasure, and enjoyment and lightheartedness. There is some sort of a work ethic that's built into my personality that I know other people share that kind of demands that unless you work hard at something, unless it's difficult, unless you're struggling, you're not really doing it right, or you're not getting the right thing. You're not fulfilling what's really expected of you. And God forbid, you're not getting better. I think that's probably one of the most common fears when people are, let's say, practicing or working on something and they cross over into some kind of lightheartedness and just having fun. For a lot of people, it's like, no, 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 that's too much fun. Too much fun. I need to work. I need to really practice. I need to focus. Fun is means that I'm not getting better. So these are some of the mindsets that we all share that our surroundings, our culture has contributed to us forming. And now we've sort of carried them into our adulthood. And we continue to see these beliefs play out. And in tango, they play out quite a bit in this way that's sort of obvious, but kind of hidden in plain sight. A lot of it shows up in our confidence or lack of it. I would say tango is probably plagued with countless dancers of very high level who have incredibly low self-esteem and low confidence just because they're not measuring up to some sort of extreme standard that they have in their own mind. So, no, I don't think that there's necessarily a kind of this special thing that one person has that another person doesn't, that makes one person more talented than another person. Maybe you can draw those conclusions when you're comparing a certain type level of musician or dancer to another level, and you might compare their virtuosity. But ultimately, I think we're all very unique and we have very different talents. I have a talent for talking clearly and articulating my thoughts. That is something that I noticed about myself when I was in high school, and other people noticed it about my writing, and it's something that I was always told that I'm good at, but I never thought of it as talent. I just thought it's something that I do. It's something I enjoy doing. It's pleasant for me. So I never pursued it professionally or even thought about making a career out of it because it's just something that's more innate. And I think that's the key for a lot of us is that we have these innate abilities, innate curiosity, innate skills that are our own, but we might actually be taking them for granted. And while at the same time actively reaching for some sort of skill set that fulfills our idea of being talented, but has nothing to do with our own natural ability. It took me years to figure that out for myself, which one's which. And a lot of it has to happen through trial and error. You go somewhere, you try something, and you like it, you don't like it. I mean, tango, that's how tango came into my life. And I didn't like tango at first. So it's sort of by chance that I even stuck it out long enough that I tapped into some sort of curiosity about it. So, assuming that we all have some sort of a natural talent for something, if we have the conditions and circumstances in place that allow us to develop them, there is a huge number of things that could happen, and we can see the fruition of that attention and that energy later on. Like when you watch the Olympic Games and you see the parents react to their child's winning of the medal. You know, you think to yourself, how did this kid end up on the podium? A lot of it is the parents who put in their energy and the belief and the systems in place to make somebody that successful. And that's really what it takes. Honestly, this is where the demystification of talent really, for me, is more important, is to recognize that sure, we all have the abilities, but unless there is a conscious, supportive, productive system in place to carry it out to make it successful, it's not really going to work, which is what I ran into. And this is why I say that hard work sometimes can backfire because you can be working really hard, but on the wrong thing. You might not have the right system in place. You might not have the right support to get you to where you want to be. So you might be doing the work, beating your head against the wall and feeling like you're not getting anywhere and interpreting that as you're not having any talent or not enough talent. But really what's happening is that there's a mismatch between your true abilities, your curiosity, your natural state of creativity, and the system that would help you carry it out. So the hard work is tricky because it really needs to be applied in a smart way. Because we are dancing tango, it means that we have some sort of right to be there. We need to be there. We are meant to be dancing if we chose it, if it's fulfilling to us, if we feel joy doing it and we want to do it more, it really means that we should be. So it might be okay to say you have a talent for it if you're doing it. But then the hard work part of it, you have to really be aware of whether you're choosing the hard work in favor of some kind of image that you're trying to live up to, or if you're choosing the hard work that you're actually interested in doing. So I'll give you an example that's real in my life that I kind of learned about myself only recently. When it comes to dancing, I have a very specific type of interest, and I'm not, as a dancer, interested in the movement or particular shapes of the dance as much as I am in the music itself. So, very naturally, my kind of natural state of curiosity has led me to binge on tango music and nerd out on tango music constantly, versus when it comes to learning new vocabulary or drilling things, a lot of times I'm like, I'll get to it. Now, in my mind for a long time, I valued the vocabulary more because in my mind, I was like, I need to know more vocabulary. I don't know enough. I'm supposed to because I'm of a certain level. I need to have more things under my belt. But that was always like, oh, that's hard. I don't want to do it. And it was always kind of an uphill battle. So once I realized, oh, wait a second, that's just not what I'm interested in, and allowed myself to follow my curiosity into music, since then, I've produced a lot of work and have gained a lot of knowledge in the musicality. It's changed my own dance. It's created more opportunities for me to express myself. So there's been all this growth in me as a dancer that comes from me just going along with the thing that's actually interesting to me versus the thing that I think I'm supposed to be interested in. Now, if you felt like you don't have enough talent or you don't have any talent and you've been struggling with this feeling of deciding what to work on and how hard to work on it, I want to leave you with some questions to ponder that hopefully will shift your perspective and give you some clues and some guidance. First of all, are you truly enjoying the process of what it is you're doing? Or are you actually doing it just for the sake of progress? You're just looking to get to the end of something. That was the case for me a lot of times when I would go to class and I would drill for hours mindlessly the whole time, just thinking about when the end of class is versus just not going at all. So recognize in yourself if that's happening for you. Second, what parts of tango actually come naturally to you? And what do people admire in you that you dismiss? So there's some things that every dancer has a specific tendency towards, and they don't even think that it's that special about them. And I would even argue that that's really their true talent, is whatever the thing you take most for granted about yourself. So it could be something that you get a lot of compliments on, but you always are saying things like, oh, it's nothing much. Oh, so and so is better. Oh, I'm just trying. So clock that in yourself. If you have certain things like that you repeatedly sort of play down, that can be a good clue about what are actually your natural talents that you might be missing. Now, the next question is, are you in an environment that actually nurtures your growth, or are you trying to force yourself into a mold that doesn't fit? Meaning, are you actually in a setup where your natural curiosity and your natural abilities can develop? So if you are really into music like I am, do you have the opportunity to just dance to the music as much as you want versus drilling or practicing? That's just an example that I myself have in my own experience, but you might have something else like that. But the feeling that you want to watch out for is that feeling of wanting to escape or not feeling like you're getting the right thing. So a lot of times for followers who progress quite fast and they end up being in classes that there's not a lot of leaders of their level. So then there's this feeling of mismatch, of that you're not getting what you really need, and the dissatisfaction because you're not actually practicing at the level that you want to be. So that's another example of how that might happen. And lastly, this one's a really good one to consider. What happens when you focus on the pleasure and curiosity of your dance instead of proving something? That's a subtle one. And this one, actually, I'll say you have to watch your mind, because I noticed for myself, a lot of times when I allow myself to really enjoy and really relax into something and really feel like I'm in my element, frequently there will be something that will jar my mind back in line and say, you're not supposed to do that. That's not allowed. You're supposed to have better posture. You're supposed to be taking bigger steps. Like all of a sudden, there will be this voice that will tell you that, in fact, you can't relax because something's very wrong. So if you feel that ever, just know that that's another clue, I think, as to those different beliefs that we have acting inside of us that tell us that the path of least resistance, the path of our natural state, is the wrong way because we were told at some point that we're supposed to suffer to get anywhere. It's supposed to be hard. We're supposed to sacrifice and it's supposed to be difficult. And that's just a way of thinking, right? The idea is, it's not that I'm saying there's not any work involved in this process or that you don't have to sacrifice ever. It's just the perception, the starting point from for us when we are actually deciding something. It's important to know where you're coming from, because if you're trying to do something for the sake of proving yourself good enough, it will never be enough. You'll never get to the place that will tell you that you are. There will always be something else. So the trick is not to fight it. It's not to make it go away and somehow get to a place where you never feel insecure or you never feel these feelings of inadequacy. The point is to recognize that that happens and then redirect your mind and decide to actually choose to be in a different state of mind, the one that feels easier, the one that you enjoy more, the one that feels like you're cheating and it's not supposed to be this much fun. Ultimately, I think our talent and the hard work that comes from our pursuit of the talent will be the most successful and will bring the most fruition if we approach it from that place of lightheartedness and play and enjoyment, rather than coming from it with this feeling of it's a pilgrimage that you have to do, you have to fulfill this discipline in order to be considered, in order to get to a place of being good enough. I want to finish with this awesome quote that I recently found by Aristotle that I think very elegantly brings together all of these ideas. He says, "We are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit." So the moral of the story is, the more you do something, the better you'll get at it. And the more you do something that is enjoyable and you can really find pleasure in, the more excellent you will get at it. I hope that serves to reassure and inspire you to continue to pursue your curiosity and develop yourself as a dancer. So now I want to hear from you. What has your experience been with this idea of talent? Did you grow up feeling like you have a certain talent, and was that talent supported? Or did you have difficulty the way a lot of people did and feeling like you are supported in your natural flow? Go ahead and share in the comments below or send me a message. And if you haven't done so already, go ahead and check out my private Facebook group that you can join. And I have live banters that I do every Friday inside that group that you can join and participate in. So the link is in the show notes, and I look forward to bantering with you next week. Until then, ciao.